So as back then we were looking at optimizing the use of AI. So I suppose we were still at a phase where we were getting into using AI, and some farms were using it, others weren't. And it was trying to get the message across about how valuable this technology was, and how AI was going to change the industry, and how it has changed the industry over those 30 years.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of The Pig Edge, Teagasc's pig podcast with me, Amy Quinn, where we are bringing you the latest news, information and advice to keep Irish pig farmers up to date. On this episode, we're diving into all the details of the upcoming annual Teagasc Pig Farmers Conference, which is celebrating 30 years of the conference this year. It's taking place on October 22nd at the Horse and Jockey Hotel, County Tipperary, and on October 23rd at the Farnham Estate in County Cavan. As always, this event brings together pig producers, stakeholders and members of the Pig Development Department for insightful presentations and discussions. It promises a wide-ranging technical programme featuring talks from both guest speakers and the Teagasc Pig Development Department staff, all designed to help you stay ahead. Plus, it's a fantastic opportunity to connect with familiar faces in the industry. In this episode, we're joined by Ciarán Carroll, Louise, Clarke and Michael McKeon from the advisory team in the Teagasc Pig Development Department as we explore what's in store for this milestone event. I first asked Louise to walk us through some of the key details of this year's conference.
On both days, the conference will kick off at the little earlier time of 12:30 to allow us to provide a light lunch for all the attendees before the presentations, which will aim to kick off at 2 p.m. So people are welcome to attend for lunch, and then we'll get straight into the presentations, the talks and the discussions for the afternoon. And then just as per the last couple of years, this is free of charge. So we would encourage, I suppose, all farmers, all staff members and industry people to come along to the event.
Ciarán, as we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Teagasc Pig Farmers Conference, can you share how it started and what makes this milestone so special?
Basically, how it started, we had the advisory service as we know it in the past, and then the research department were a separate division, unlike today where we're all the one department. But they worked very closely because we're a small group anyway. So at the time, you had two specialist advisors, Michael Martin and the late Pat Chute on the advisory side, and then Brendan Lynch, who was the head of pig husbandry in the research side. And they were trying to establish a national event for pig farmers. They had more park conferences on and off ad hoc efforts in previous years, but they wanted to try and set up a kind of a national event that would become an annual event for pig farmers. So that's how it started. They got together, they planned out how it would work, and the way it was basically a roadshow that the Teagasc personnel would go on a roadshow over 3 days as it was back then. Nowadays it's a 2-day event, and they kind of organise it around geographical areas where there was a lot of pig production. So you had West Cork venue, you had a Midlands kind of southeast venue, and then up Cavan / Longford venue up there. So 3 venues over the 3 days, and it started 30 years ago, and it's still going and has endured thankfully for that 30 years, and hopefully another 30 to come.
Ciarán, what do you believe has contributed to the conference's lasting success over the years?
Yeah, I suppose a mixture of things, Amy. It did, as I said, the lads that organised it wanted it to become a kind of a national event each year. So it became an established event. It's on every October, usually around the same third week in October. So I suppose it became an established event. Pig farmers and industry knew it was going to happen every October. I suppose it's supported then by some great information that was provided. It was either research coming from Moore Park or international research, and then some technical papers done by the advisors in Teagasc as well. So there was good information being provided, and that was aided and abetted then by the guest speakers, whether they were local, national, guest speakers from different sectors in the industry or from within Teagasc themselves, but also the international guest speakers. And I suppose that's a big selling point for us. It was great 30 years ago that you'd get international guest speakers to come and talk to our so-called small industry here in Ireland on a various range of topics, and that has endured over the years as well. So there's always an interest in who the guest speaker is going to be and what they're going to talk about. And I suppose the thing that shouldn't really be forgotten here at all is the whole social opportunity. You know, small number of pig farmers now relative to when it 30 years ago even. But it was a social opportunity for farmers to get together, meet other pig farmers, share their stories, what was going on in their farms, things that they might pick up from each other that they could take home outside of what was being presented at the conference. So it was a social opportunity for farmers as well. And over the years, plenty of the groups and farmers would have stayed on late into the night to chat about the proceedings and about pig farming in general. So it's endured for a number of reasons, but they'd be the main ones, I suppose.
Ciarán, what kind of topics were we focusing on 30 years ago?
It's interesting when you look at the and it's in the proceedings with the schedule or table of contents for the first conference, which took place in the House Hotel down in Macroom. And then we went up to Silver Springs, I think, in Kilkenny, and then the Kilmore Hotel in Cavan. Yeah, so it's interesting when you look at them. So as back then we were looking at these new feeders, these wet dry single space feeders. Dr. Norman Walker from AFPI in the north of Ireland was speaking about those, and they were new to us. And he was presenting his research on how they compared with the trough feeders and wet feeders and things like that. And look, we now know nowadays they've become the norm on a lot of farms. We have the single space feeders, double space feeders, and triple space feeders that are being used today. An interesting other one was optimizing the use of AI. So I suppose we were still at a phase where we were getting into using AI, and some farms were using it, others weren't, and it was tried to get the message across about how valuable this technology was and how AI was going to change the industry and how it has changed the industry over those 30 years. Another curious one was dry sow housing after tethers, would you believe? So it was even before group housing. When sows were stalled in tethers in when they were pregnant. So the legislation was changing, and it was how we were going to live with life after tethers, and how we would house our pregnant sows. They would be the ones that I suppose would be kind of interesting from a historical point of view. I suppose the other side of it, at the time, we were also looking at slaughter weights. What were the optimum slaughter weights? We were looking at diet specs and pig performance related issues. So well, certainly a lot of things have changed over the years. The old saying, the more things change, the more they say the same. We were still covering some topics, and we're still covering today some topics that we would have been covering 30 years ago, and seeing how they have evolved as well. So that's just a sample of what we would have been looking at back then.
Yeah, so plenty has changed over the past 30 years, and you've touched on a bit of it there, but can you take us through some of the other main ones?
Look, if you look at the performance, the Teagasc, what was the PIG-SIS National Performance Herd Recording System, now the Profit Monitor System. If you look at the figures, and again, there's a table in the proceedings where it shows the differences over the 30 years. So just a sample of those. So born alive back then would have been in 1994, 10.8 pigs per sow per year born alive. Now we're almost at 15, at 14.9 in 2023. The pigs produced per sow per year has gone up 6 pigs in that period of time, from 21.7 pigs produced back in 1994 to 27.9 in 2023. Sale weights, this is really interesting. If you look at sale weights now, the live weight back in 1994 was averaging 85.6 kilos or 64.7 kilos dead. Now we're looking at an average sale weight of 116.8 kilos live or 89.3 kilos dead. So the actual dead weight today is 3 kilos, 4 kilos more than what the live weight was back in 1994. So a massive change there, and that's transferred then into the pig meat sold per sow. We were looking at 1.4 tons of pig meat being sold per sow 30 years ago. Now we're at 2.5 tons. So massive change over the years. I'm not saying that the pig conferences or pig farmers conference is the reason those changes were made, but I would definitely like to think that the conference has had an impact on those key parameters, those key performance indicators, and has contributed some way towards the improvements we've seen in the sector over the 30 years.
Michael or Louise, has there been any standout moments for you from the conferences over the years?
I've been at a good few of them. Yeah, there's been a lot of papers there. God, just off the top of my head, we had Mike Tokash from Kansas State talked in the late 90s or early 2000s on phase feeding for finishers for weaners. It was a very good paper and is still relevant today. Clarke did a breakdown of the energy costs on a pig unit. So he took 25 or 30 units, looked at their energy usage, and looked then at broke down the energy usage into each of the sections. And that's still relevant today, because if you're looking to some installation for pig buildings and stuff like that, where will you get your biggest bang in your buck? Is it going to be the farmhouse, the first stage weaners and stuff like that? So Seamus's paper was very good in quantifying that. And then more recent times, I suppose, there are 2 papers by Padder Lawler. One was, I'd say, 2016, where he looked at what the sow needs in the farmhouse from a nutritional point of view, and that paper is still very relevant today. So as the born alive is going up, what does she need? The increase in the nutrients she needs. And then the other paper he did, I'd say, is 2018 or 2019. and it just looked at different feed ingredients, but it also looked at the value of using pelleted feed. And it came about that if you use pelleted feed compared to meal feeding, it's worth about €20 a ton. So there are some of the papers, I suppose, like there's more recent papers then as well, but there's some of the older ones there that just spring to mind.
I suppose one of my standout moments would have been in last year's conference, where we had Des Rice speaking. So I suppose a slightly different tack from the highlights Michael's talked about, but equally as important, given the previous 12 to 24 months that the pig sector had gone through at that time. And Des, he gave a real, I suppose, memorable and impactful presentation on human behavior and the stress management issues. And then some techniques for staying calm as well. And like I know many of us would even in the pig department are still doing our 7-11 breathing and our muscle relaxation techniques. So I suppose in addition to Michael's highlights, Des would have been one of my highlights there in more recent years.
Michael, you're looking at low-hanging fruits this year. Can you tell us more?
So it's low-hanging FC fruits this year. So it's really looking at feed conversion efficiency has the biggest effect, as we all know, on feed cost. And if you can lower your feed conversion, you're going to lower the feed cost. So how do you do it? So it sounds like a simple question. How do you actually do it? So what we've done is we've looked at 8 or 9 of the main factors that will affect your feed efficiency. And then what we looked at is research based on these 8 or 9 factors and looking at the effect that each of these factors have on an individual basis with feed conversion. So mortality, the health of the unit, space allowance, feeder allowance, all of those things. And showing then, right, how does that affect your feed cost then as well? So, and then after that, we've picked out 3 of them and we have looked at these in more detail, using on-farm trial data that we've also done to look at these and look at the effects on a real farm unit. So if you're in the audience, what I'm hoping you'll get out of it is you'll say, right, out of these 8 or 9, there's 2 of these factors there that I think will work in my unit. And if they work in my unit, it will save me €3, 4 cents, 5 cents in my feed cost per kilo.
Louise, you're honing in on the hidden cost of empty days on farms. What can people expect to find out here?
Yeah, Amy. So as you said, my talk is on empty days, and I suppose it's a review of your breeding and your reproduction performance on farm. I suppose as advisors, we kind of noticed that this was something that was popping up throughout the year. And we felt that the conference would be a good chance to highlight some of the issues that are out there and also to have a list for farmers that they can take from and kind of make sure they're keeping on top of. So the talk will focus on the importance of monitoring your empty days and your overall breeding performance. So it's going to highlight like how reducing your non-productive days through different or kind of effective management practices will both significantly improve your profitability on farm, but also your productivity as well. So a lot through different effective management, some which farmers will be doing really well and others which they might just need to put a little more intention into in order to help them to reduce their non-productive days.
Ciarán, at the conference we're going to also introduce the Well Farmers project to people, and I may be biased, but this project is quite exciting and it looks to be different to the ones we've seen before. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so Well Farmers, as the name would indicate, it's a welfare project. It's a EU Horizon funded project, and it involves a number of countries from across Europe and different bodies and groups. So be they farmers, academics, universities, research centres, and interested parties. But the difference about this, I suppose, it's a bottom-up approach. So it's ideas coming from the farmers. So it's fed from the farmers up through the system. And what it's looking at 4 welfare areas. You're looking at rearing pigs with intact tails, looking at floor space and housing design for pigs. We're looking at loose farrowing options. for sows, and we're also looking at rearing pigs or castration without pain. Now that's not an area that relates to Ireland because we don't castrate pigs here, but the other three areas are very topical and very relevant. And it's set up in a way that the farmers will kind of identify what are the key issues in their countries. They'll be shared through the European network, the Well Farmers Network, and they'll also have to try and come up with best practices and good practices of what's working in relation to those key areas. So the idea is that there's a regional group in each of the countries involved that's comprised of farmers, industry people, vets, Teagasc, Animal Health Ireland and the likes, and they will come together, identify the problems, and then also identify good practices and best practices that are helping in the areas. They'll be fed into the main group or the thematic groups at the European level, and we'll nominate and identify the best practices and best practice winners, good practice winners for each of the categories over the few years of the project. So yeah, look, it promises to be a very interesting project, and we're looking forward to seeing how it evolves and what sort of learnings we can take from it and bring back to Ireland so that we can try and progress the welfare of the pig and the farmer.
Michael, we have international commodities expert Pedro None joining us as a guest speaker this year. What can you tell us about his talk?
Yeah, we've had some really, really good speakers from abroad over the last number of years, and we're hoping Pedro is going to be the same. He is Spanish by birth, but I think he's living in Switzerland at the moment. But he spent about 35 years in the commodity world, so buying and selling of feed ingredients. So he has a big background in the whole area of, I suppose, feed usage, the economics of that. But this paper is probably broadening out his what he's looking at there, and he's looking more maybe at the future as where we're going on the production of crops, looking at the population changes, both from a use of ingredients, but also from a use, say, of the need for pig meat. And then he's looking at the effective technologies as well. So where there's big data and where there's AI and those kind of technology changes, how are they going to affect both logistics of moving the feed commodities, but also simply the information we have on growing the pig, growing the crops, and getting the pig meat to market. So I'm looking forward to it. It's probably a slightly different take and a broader aspect than we sometimes have. So it's not directly at pig husbandry, but it's something that is going to affect the pig sector going forward.
Ciarán, we also have Hans Bunkert from Denmark as one of our guest speakers this year. Can you tell us what we can expect to hear from him?
Yeah, Hans Bunkert, he's a Danish pig vet. He was one of the founder members of Porcus Denmark, or Porcus DK. They're a veterinary consultancy in Denmark, but they also do a lot of international consultancy as well. And he's coming over to talk to us specifically on the area of cross-fostering and North Sows. And so, like, I suppose, with any cross-fostering process, you're looking to ensure the survival of the piglets that are born and to ensure good weaning weights then when they're weaned off that sow. And as I mentioned earlier, we can see how litter size has increased over the years. So this technology of cross-fostering and the use of North Sows is something that's very interesting to international farmers, but especially to Irish farmers, as we see how we can manage cross-fostering. We've done some cross-fostering research in Moorpark. So it'll be interesting to hear his take on what works in practical situations in Denmark. He'll go through the types of systems that are available for these systems for cross-fostering and North Sows. He'll go through the do's and the don'ts of those, and it promises to be a very informative presentation and discussion with him.
And Louise, what can we expect from another of our guest speakers, Elizabeth Ball of AFBI?
Yeah, Amy. So Dr. Elizabeth Ball, she's a senior scientific officer. I'm sure many of your listeners will know who Elizabeth is already, but for those of you those of them that don't, Elizabeth has a number of research projects that are all relevant to the pig industry. So Elizabeth's main focus is on optimizing nutrient utilization from both conventional and novel feed ingredients. And then she also does work on reducing the environmental impact of both the pig and poultry production. So for this year, Elizabeth's presentation will focus on strategies for lowering nitrogen excretion from pig production and providing, I suppose, insights that are crucial for sustainable farming practices. So two areas that Elizabeth will kind of focus on. Firstly, we'll be looking at kind of slaughter weights. We know that they've increased there over the last number of years. And I suppose the question is there a need for an additional finisher diet at 100 kilos onwards, or does this have a negative effect on performance? Along with looking at the difference in requirements from both boars and gilts. And then I suppose secondly, Elizabeth will talk about ammonia and look at the reduction in crude protein, and from this, what reduction we can expect in ammonia emissions. And she also will discuss, the positive impacts on odour emissions and slurry output as a result of reduced crude protein. So I suppose it's a very topical area at the moment, and one I'm really looking forward to.
I suppose all that's really left to be said is that we look forward to seeing you all there, either on the 22nd in the Horse and Jockey or the 23rd in Farnham Estate, starting at 12:30 on both days. Thanks all for joining me.
Thanks, Amy.
Thanks a million.
Many thanks.
That's it for this episode of The Pig Edge, and thanks to Ciarán, Louise and Michael for joining me on the show. Don't forget to listen and follow on Apple, Spotify or wherever you get your podcast from, so you never miss an episode. And for more information from the Pig Development Department, go to teagasc.ie. I'm Amy Quinn. Thanks for listening.